as advertised, we are back with Denvil Lee. Say hi.
Hello.
Okay, and we had put it out there that there were, we would be willing to answer questions. And actually, when I first began my channel, and I was talking about how God had transformed me, touched my life, and made something out of nothing. Some people, as people were watching my videos, they were saying, well, what about if you did some videos answering questions? Well, I never felt competent enough to answer. I mean, I have no problem telling my story. That's no big deal.
Yeah.
But to answer in-depth questions, I just never felt confident or competent. But the thing, God answered my prayer because I really wanted to be able to do that, because a lot of people had written me questions and stuff that I just didn't know the right answers. And so then all of a sudden I was sitting in church, because Denvil recently, as I said last time, he became our senior pastor. And he's 29, but I'm telling you, he's doing, I'm 58, he's doing an excellent job.
Thank you.
And honestly, a lot of my questions, like the big deal kind of questions, have been answered as I listen to him talk. And it's just stuff that he has. It's like we all have different gifts, and it's like God has given him insight into these things, and it makes sense. Things make sense. So anyway, and there, of course, we said last time that there's a lot of things that maybe we'll have to say we don't know.
Yeah.
And but anyway, somebody took us up on it. Actually, two people, but we're only going to deal with the first question today, and this is going to be a regular thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to read the question, and then Denvil's going to, see what he can do. Okay, this is from Shania Smith. Thank you, Shania. She said, "Hi, Mary and Denvil. One question I've always had is, why does God take the best people too early? Specifically, one person, my boyfriend's sister, was killed in a car crash. I never knew her personally because she died before we were able to meet, but I know she was this happy, kind, loving person who created art and volunteered with special needs kids. Everybody loved her. I know God always does the right thing, and I do not doubt his choices, but why does he take people so close to our hearts? The only way I can explain this to myself is a story a former teacher told me. She had said a relative that was just very pure and innocent and a good person lived a very bad childhood with a mean family. Well, one day, I believe, if I remember correctly, she was run over by her own brother on accident, but still killed. My teacher told me she thinks this poor girl was killed so soon because God wanted her back in heaven as an angel and did not want her to live such a horrible life on earth. Do you think this could be true? That God takes certain people back to be with him in heaven to not have to be with all of the sin on earth?"
Wow.
Yeah, heavy.
First off, if I could just say, you are obviously super competent and super confident. That's
Thank you.
And in regards to this, obviously, first off, sorry for the loss, and for the family, and if there's anything at all that we can understand about our humanity, is that those are the times when the answers really don't matter. In times of loss, I always encourage people, in times of loss and in times of mourning, when someone loses a loved one, and they may ask, why does this happen? I find that very few people are actually looking for responses or answers. It's almost rhetorical, and what they're actually what they're actually looking for is you. They're looking for me. They're looking for us. They're looking
Comfort.
for the comfort. They're looking for one another. They're looking for someone to mourn with them, to be with them, to understand them, to just be there. And so answers don't satisfy. Because
true.
you can still have the answers, and it doesn't bring the person back. It doesn't bring you peace. It doesn't end the grief. And so answers is not the thing that brings us the comfort, but it's our humanity. It's our love for one another. And I think that's the real emphasis that I just want to kind of put a blanket of that over this. These answers are not to satisfy any of these things. But it's just rather to help us start to figure some of these things out, and just to kind of grow in our understanding, but definitely not to quench the grief, because answers simply don't do that, So this is a very huge theological question, and it's difficult to kind of tackle this in a short time frame, as I'm going to try to.
Wait, excuse me. If you feel like going over, I mean, if just ramble, just
right.
do your heart, and we can
All right.
always make it. We can always make it 2 sections.
Oh, okay, excellent. All right, so there's a principle that I think we have to understand when we look at anything, and as we answer more questions throughout these series, and we look at different topics, there's a driving principle that I think we have to understand about humanity, that we have to understand about the way the world works, about the way that God works, and we have to apply it to every single situation, every single concept. I went walking with my son this morning, so we woke up early and we went for a walk, and there was a man that was walking down the street, and my son loves to wave and say hi to everyone as he passed down the street.
He's little.
So yeah, he's turning 3, and my son sees a man walking down the street, and he asked me, who's that? Because he thinks I know everyone, and he asked me, who's that? And I said, it's just a guy walking down the street, and to a 3-year-old, it's just a guy walking down the street. Mm-hmm. And I explained to him it's just a guy walking down the street, and it's really simple. But the more that I think about it, once he becomes 16 or 17, or once he gets older, the simple man walking down the street is no longer just a simple man walking down the street, because there's so much more that's happening behind this man walking down the street. And so even just in the anatomy, in the physical realm of this man walking down the street, you're considering the pumping of the heart and the blood that's going through the veins. You're considering his vision, his balance, the dynamic of his body, the electrons and neutrons. There's so much that is happening. He's burning calories. There's stuff that's happening physically inside of his body. And so this simple man walking down the street just got a little bit more complex. And then you start to think about even something psychologically. Where is he going and why is he walking? Is he poor? Does he not have a car? Did he leave his wife and is he walking? Is he homeless? Does he have a home? Is he exercising? And what is the cause of him walking? What is his direction? Where is he going? Is he running away from something? Is he going to go hurt someone? What is his intention? What is his motive? And so now this simple man walking down the street, there's so many more dynamics to him now. Now there's a physical dynamic to the interiors of why he can move with his joints and his bones and his ligaments and the stuff that's happening in his body, and then in his mind and in his direction. And there's so many different areas, even a lot more than I've mentioned now, but just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. And so to my 3-year-old, he's just a man walking down the street. That's it. It's really simple. But as he gets older and he starts to learn about these different areas, this man walking down the street, the picture becomes a little bit more complex.
Wow. Yeah.
And as he meets this man now, and as he talks to him, and he may see him again tomorrow, now he knows his life and he knows his anatomy. And so him walking down the street is not just the simple man walking down the street anymore. And this is the approach that we have to have on life. Life is not single dimensioned. Life is not a single dimension, and we can never look at life in a single dimension. I think one of the greatest problems I had before I became a Christian is that I believed that there was one answer to everything, and that was the only answer that could satisfy, and that's the only answer that there was, and everything else that didn't fit into that one dimension of my thinking wasn't true.
Excuse me, because for anybody who didn't see the previous one, Denvil was a committed atheist.
Yeah. So and so the one-dimensional thinking, it's and I explained that, and I kind of prefaced the answer with that, because there's not a single answer as to why good people die. Because so if we start to ask this question, why do good people die, we have to kind of break this down into a few different areas. One, what makes this person good or bad? So I think the question said that a teacher provided an answer you know, that God takes certain people back to be with him, to not have to be with all the sin on the earth, you know. And so there's, and just in our maturity level and in what we need at the time, that's the equivalent of there's a man walking down the street. You know, that and so I'm not saying that's wrong, I'm not saying that's not true. I'm saying, well, that's true, but there's a little bit more of a complexity to this answer, and so that's kind of what I want to build on. Not to take away from that, because what I'm about to explain, it doesn't take away from the man walking down the street. But I'm saying I just want to explain a little bit more of the dynamic of this man walking down the street, so he's no longer just this single dimension of thinking. So in considering this, we have to ask, like, what is a good person? You know, we see on the news all the time when you know, as a police officer, it happens all the time. We'll see someone who gets killed, and their family comes on the news and said, you know, he was such a great guy, like he loved everyone. And then some media will spin it and throw his criminal record up and say he was arrested 28 times and he did all these terrible things. And so then there becomes the debate of, is he a good person or is he a bad person? And so we have to kind of be careful and start to decide what is the criteria for good and bad. What makes a person good and what makes a person bad? And is there such a good thing as good people or bad people? You know, and so if we say that God has taken away this one person so that they won't be in the sin and in the badness of the world, then are the rest of us bad? And this person better? Wow. You know, so we there's probably a little bit more to consider when we start to present these kind of answers. I think trying to explain or justify sin and brokenness and death and all these things, if we try to justify it in the earth, if we try to justify it in the world, I think that we're always wrong in finding justification, because you're trying to give an answer to the placement of something that doesn't belong. Death doesn't belong. And so there's no answer that I can give you to make it belong.
It's true. That
answer in itself would be a fallacy, because I'm trying to place, I'm trying to justify the existence of something that just doesn't belong. Like, why is my shoe on the table? I can give you a million explanations. It doesn't belong there.
Yeah.
And so the best answer is it doesn't belong. There is no justification for it. It does not belong in the earth. And so if we look at this from a biblical standpoint, we'll see that the Christian story, or even the Hebraic story, the Jewish story, starts off with a man and a woman in a garden as God has created them, and they're made to live forever. And as they're made to live forever, they eat from a tree of life. They're eating the fruit from the tree of life, and they get to live forever. And something happens in this dynamic, you know, and we know the story of Adam and Eve, is that they disobey God and they eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and then they become aware of good and evil, and then suddenly God tells them that they can no longer be in the garden. And they can no longer be in the garden because now...
Wait, 2 minutes.
Sure, yeah. And they can no longer be in the garden because now they have a knowledge of evil. So they always knew good, you know. So when they ate the fruit, they didn't come to know good and evil. They just came to know evil because they already knew good. But now they could tell the difference. And so God in all his goodness said, if you stay living forever, now knowing evil, then God would not be a good God if he left you living for eternity with the knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
And so you can't stay in the garden. And so that's where death comes from. Death is a fallacy. Death doesn't belong. There is no explanation. There is no justification. It does not belong in the picture. It never belonged in the picture. And that's just another dimension to this. There's more. There's different areas, but that's just one dimension to this.
I would like to continue.
Yes.
And so make a second part.
Sure.
So you know, look for, if you're interested in this subject. If you want to know more about the answer to this question, or from Denvil's heart, we're going to make a part 2. So bye for now.